Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Israel Brief, brought to you, as always, by these guys, Lay of the Land, and hosted by me, Rolene Marks, where we take a look at your top stories making headlines in Israel every Monday to Thursday. Now, don't forget to stay tuned for those details where you can find us online. But before we get to those important deets, let's take a look at those top stories. Yesterday, we brought you the story that Hamas had released a rare statement claiming that the medical condition of one of the two Israeli captives was rapidly deteriorating. Yesterday, shortly after our broadcast, they released footage of Hisham al-Sayed, one of the two live captive Israelis. He was lying on a bed, looking very, very gaunt and wearing an oxygen mask. His Israeli ID card was on his person. Now, this has drawn widespread condemnation across Israel, and our interim prime minister as well as our sitting prime minister have both condemned it, calling it inhumane and deplorable. Yesterday, in a statement released, our interim Prime Minister Yair Lapid stated that this is a terrible breaking or flouting of international law, and that Hamas is responsible for not just holding these Israelis captive, but also the people of the Gaza Strip captive. He appealed to the international community and to international organizations like the International Red Cross, as well as the World Health Organization, to put the pressure on Hamas to free the captive Israelis, as well as free the remains of two fallen Israeli soldiers, Hadar Golden and Oron Shaul, that Hamas have been holding since Operation Protective Edge in 2014. Al-Sayed's father, commenting earlier today, said he thinks that all Israeli prisoners should be freed, and he's willing to wait for his son to come home safely. Meanwhile, Israel's national broadcaster reported earlier today that Hamas was prepared to let in one Israeli to be part of negotiations. Their Arab correspondent, Roy Kass, said that this is likely to be Yoel Mershek, a social activist who will speak to a Palestinian social activist by the name of Sami Ubed. It is believed, or it has been reported in the Arab media, that Hamas are asking for the release of sick Palestinians in exchange for Hisham al-Sayed. Meanwhile, we continue to hope for a speedy recovery and for a safe return of both Hisham al-Sayed and Avera Mengistu, who have been in captivity since 2014. These are both Israeli citizens who both suffer from mental illness, and this is as per their families. Yesterday, Hamas referred to them as soldiers. This is erroneous. Hisham al-Sayed is believed to have served 1 year in the IDF. He is a Bedouin from the Negev town of Hura, and Avera Mengistu is an Ethiopian Israeli. We also pray for the safe return to their families of the remains of Hadar Golden and Oron Shaul, so that they can be buried within the bounds of the Geneva Convention that protects the rights of fallen soldiers, whether in battle or in captivity, to be returned home for a decent burial. Meanwhile, the founder of Zaka, Yehuda Meshi Zahav, has passed away earlier today. He attempted to take his life about a year ago, when it was alleged in a documentary by Channel 12 that he was facing accusations of rape, sexual assault, and pedophilia. Meshi Zahav, who was awarded the Israel Prize for founding this extraordinary organization called Zaka, which works for rescue and relief, and really is the first on site whenever there is a natural or other disaster, be it here in Israel or around the world, attempted to take his life and was found unconscious by his son in his Jerusalem apartment. He was in Herzog Hospital, where he remained unconscious for over a year. The Knesset is sitting at the moment passing and voting a variety of laws, and it is expected to pass the final reading to dissolve itself later today. And as of midnight, it is expected that Prime Minister Bennett will step down and interim Prime Minister Yair Lapid will take the Prime Ministership. It is also confirmed that interim Prime Minister Lapid will live in an apartment in the Prime Ministerial compound, while the residence undergoes renovations. And our final story is one that really warms the heart. The U.S. Special Envoy on Anti-Semitism, Deborah Lipstadt, who many of you might be well aware of her extraordinary work in Holocaust education, is visiting Saudi Arabia. She will also visit other Arab countries as well as Israel later this week and early next month. But she convened a round table hosted by Arab News, where she lauded the Saudis, saying she was overwhelmed by the extraordinary progress that the Saudi Arabians are doing towards fighting anti-Semitism and educating about Jewish history and Jewish culture. And I'm overwhelmed as well. I think that it is truly extraordinary. And it seems that Arab countries are really leading in the fight to combat anti-Semitism. We see it in Saudi Arabia. We see it amongst our allies in Morocco, in the United Arab Emirates, and in Bahrain. And we wish that the Western world will start to adopt the attitude that these countries are adopting. Just saying, just putting it out there. So that brings me to the end of today's top stories, but a reminder that you can find us online on our website at www.layoftheland.online. We have a lovely article by Jonathan Feldstein about the growing ties between Israel and Latin America. Check it out. It's up there. It's also on our Facebook page. If you haven't joined our community, please give us a like or a follow. Please consider sharing our content. And if you're viewing us on YouTube at the Israel Brief, we would love it if you click on that red subscribe button. That way we get stories from Israel that everybody says don't make the mainstream media. We get them out to the mainstream media. And of course, we're on Twitter at Lay of the Land 5. So from an extremely hot and humid Israel, I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief. Don't forget to join me tomorrow for our final broadcast of the week. Stay tuned and take care.